on. Come on. Oh, hi! Well, it's been a week since this thing came out, and I'm still £400 poorer. But let's see, was it worth it? Well, I thought we could spend a few minutes discussing if it is worth it, and if it's actually going to be a good console. Because I actually think I have quite a lot to say. So, let's discuss.
Now, I got a Nintendo Switch early on in its life, and I've had quite a few different ones since. I finally settled on this OLED model, and these different third-party Joy-Cons. And yeah, great console, amazing games, and it's a great time to be a Nintendo fan. But obviously, it had many flaws, such as a poor eShop, poor specs, even for the time of release, and as we all know, quite poorly made controllers. Whilst the Joy-Cons did have their own merits, the main thing most people will remember the Joy-Cons for are the stick drift. I've never seen it as bad as I did on the Switch, but despite that, the Switch has a very special place in my heart, and I have tons of good memories with it.
But now this era is over, and it's been succeeded with a direct sequel. It's been about a week since I got my hands on one of these, and, well, are they a waste of money? I'm not sure. So let's discuss.
I was a child when the Switch first came out, and now I'm an adult. And this is important because this is my first time I've bought a console with what is my own money. And that is kind of exciting for me. But then it maybe makes me wonder even more if the money I have paid for this is actually worth it.
Well, if we examine this, it's pretty much clear from the get-go that this is the better system. It's nicer to hold, the Joy-Cons detach way nicer and way easier than they did before, in theory. The kickstand is way better, and the size difference, this is an original model Switch, it's not mine, but it's the one I have at hand at the moment. Completely different sizes. The screen's higher resolution, and this kickstand, the original ever kickstand, awful. The first time I ever used a Nintendo Switch kickstand, I was outside at a bus stop waiting for my bus. I thought, oh, I'll use it in, what's this called? Detach mode? I'm not sure what that was called, but I thought, oh, I'll use it with the Joy-Cons detached. So I set it down, and straight away, pretty much about 5 minutes later, it completely fell off. Gave me and my nan a heart attack. We thought we'd completely broken the system after about half an hour of owning it. I was really upset. But the Switch 2 is just the better feeling system, the better looking system, and in my opinion, the kickstand is great. But that said, I prefer the Switch OLED kickstand because it's just wider and I don't know, it's just nicer. Opinion might change in a couple of months, but as of now, I just prefer this kickstand because it's just way nicer. But hey, comparing it to the original, complete upgrade. It goes to the sky. Amazing system so far.
Well, to start with, the specs are better. And look, okay, I'm not going to talk about something about, I don't actually understand. But I do hear that the console is similar to the PS4 in specs, and for some reason that isn't a good thing. I mean, I sometimes see people compare it to a PS5 or Xbox Series X, and it's kind of just what's the thought process there? Come on, it's a portable system, and it's not a fully fledged home console. Plus, this is Nintendo, they never really go for full specs if they can afford it. I mean, the Wii was literally just a GameCube with motion controls, and I mean, okay, so a lot of people compare it to the Steam Deck, and I have one, and yeah, it's a great piece of tech, but to say it rivals the Switch or the Switch 2 is a bit silly for a few reasons. Mainly that they're both different devices, and I, for one, got them both for two very different reasons. But that's not something I'm going to go into at this moment. But anyway, the Switch 2 brings a new Joy-Con, the Joy-Con 2, and to be fully honest,
the Switch 2's Joy-Cons are so good. I mean, I'm not going to downplay the fact that the Switch's Joy-Cons attached and detached really easily, but these are just such a step above. They're literally the best part of the system in my opinion. And that does actually cause an issue in that the Switch 1 Joy-Cons cannot connect to the console without Bluetooth. So that is a bit of an issue in my opinion, but it's not like the be all or end all. However, we can also use the Pro controller for the Switch 1 on the Switch 2, which works out great for me because now I don't need to fork out for a new one, which is even better because I didn't even pay for my original.
Turning the console on, and we're actually met with what I would say is quite a disappointment actually. The UI is basically just the same as the Switch 1 with some very small refinements and changes. But it's still the same overall UI. Do I think that was a good idea? Not really. I would have liked a completely new interface, but I will say it helped make it really easy to settle into the Switch 2. And at least there were some differences, even if small. And that's much better than what the Xbox Series X did at launch, with the exact same UI as the Xbox One at the time. And that really disappointed me at the time when I got one, and it still does a bit to this day. Most of the layout was the same, more or less, on the Switch 2. At least there are some differences that set it aside from the Switch 1.
There's one more big talking point that the Switch 2 has, and that's the fact that it feels like you can brick it by just doing this. And, okay, I'll agree, that is bad. We shouldn't be in a point where they can just break our systems. But, correct me if I'm wrong, but don't Microsoft and Sony also do that? Maybe not to the extent that Nintendo's doing, but it's definitely still something that everyone else does. And it does make sense as to why they do that. They are a business at the end of the day. I'm not saying I support it by any means, but it makes sense from a business standpoint. And like, that's not their fault in the grand scheme of things. Like, if you're going to mod a system, you take that risk of bricking the system. For example, when I modded my 3DS, I took that risk of potentially bricking the 3DS. Obviously, 3DS modding's like really easy, that you're never gonna do that. But it's there, it can happen. And so, if you're worried about bricking the Switch 2, don't mod it. Like, if you don't want to break your system, don't do something that you could brick it with. I just feel like that's just something simple, but a lot of people are just finding reasons to hate the Switch 2, and I mean, come on, there's a lot to hate about Nintendo, but this ain't it. The Switch 2, so far, is great. One thing I see on the internet a lot is, oh, if I get a Steam Deck, I can just mod it and it'll be like the best system ever. Okay, like, go and do that. I have a Steam Deck, I've modded it, and I've used emulation on there. It's okay. The Steam Deck has many issues. One, it is boiling hot if you run some certain games on there. I would know. It's really, really thick. It's actually nearly, I'd say about double the size of a Switch 2, give or take, roughly. That doesn't really stop it from being good for me. I do think it is a good system standalone, but I also think comparing it with a Switch 2 is a bit weird, because I think I speak for a lot of people when I say you're not going to get a Switch 2 to like play fucking GTA 6 or anything like that. You're getting Switch 2 to play the Nintendo exclusives, and unless it's your only system, you probably will play like third-party games like, for example, Fortnite on a different console, because you're going to want something that runs best. And obviously the Nintendo games are only going to come out on the Nintendo system, and will probably just be optimized better for the Nintendo system anyway. And so that's what I got the Switch 2 for, and I'm sure that's what a lot of many people did get the Switch 2 for. And furthermore, there's casuals you've got to put into this too. They don't give a fuck about modding it or emulation, they just want to play the fucking Mario Party or something, you know? So it's such a silly thing to me to bring up this like, oh, I can mod a Steam Deck. Like, yeah, so can I. I've done that. I've still got a fucking Switch 2, man.
So obviously, the standout game at launch is none other than the amazing Mario Kart World. This game is an amazing game, and in my opinion, the best Mario Kart ever. And I made a really big mistake when I was obtaining this game.
Okay, take a minute and look at this box. What can you see? I'll tell you, no Mario Kart World, because I was so stupid when I pre-ordered this console. I didn't think to get the Mario Kart World bonus, because I was like, oh no, I might not like it. Oh my god, I was so stupid. I was pre-ordering that like 2 weeks before the Switch 2 came out. And that means I've got the physical version, which does work out better for me because that's who I am. I do like my physical games. However, I am not happy that I've had to spend extra money than if I'd have just gotten the pre-order. But, aside from that, Mario Kart World is very, very fun. Is it worth the amount I've paid? No. Would it be better if I'd paid £10 or £15 less? I'd say yes, that would have been a very fair price. But shelving that, I do think it's a very good game. Like, amazing, actually. And I think it's the perfect game to launch with the Switch. Because think about it. It's Mario Kart. That's like fucking Nintendo 101. That's like the best for the Switch 2 because it comes with 2 controllers built in, and so you can just play the Switch 2 Mario Kart wherever, whenever, with whoever. Some of my fondest memories with the original Switch were we were in a like hospital waiting room, and I pulled out my Switch and we played Mario Kart 8 whilst we waited, and that's just really fun. And that was like some of the most fun I've had on the Switch ever, and I'm really hoping to recreate that feeling with my Switch 2 in the future. Hopefully not in a hospital waiting room, but hey, you get the point. So, yes, great game, overpriced, still fun. And I'm definitely going to get about 100 hours of use out of it, at least.
Looking at some of the upcoming games for the Switch 2, I'm sure this console is going to be full of amazing games. One that I'm particularly looking forward to is Donkey Kong Bonanza. It seems like the Mario Odyssey of the Switch 2's first year. Although, that said, it would really be nice to see some kind of 3D Mario at some point, considering we're past like 8 years since the last proper one.
Now, that could mean that they are just working on a brand new 3D Mario, and that could mean that they're making like the best 3D Mario ever, but it might take a lot to fill Odyssey's shoes. I mean, Odyssey was amazing. I've played it like 5 million times. It's such a great game. So will it be able to fill Mario Odyssey's shoes and surpass it as the best 3D Mario game in my opinion? Who knows? But I did say that about Mario Kart 8. I was worried, will Mario Kart World be as good as Mario Kart 8? And I think it is. I think it's way better. But speaking of Mario Kart World, that's not the only game I got for Nintendo Switch 2. I also got Deltarune.
I've been a fan of Undertale, and by extension Deltarune, for such a long time now. It's one of the key factors in one of the most important relationships in my life, and so it's got a really important place in my life. And I'm sure that many people have felt the same way. And when I was watching the Direct and Deltarune was announced to be launching with the Switch 2, I was ecstatic, especially since I had come up with a bet like 4 years ago with someone that had ended up with me getting the game for free. Though that said, I do think the price of £20 for the game and all future chapters is way more than fair, especially with how amazing the actual game is. Playing these first 2 chapters, and yeah, of course, they're amazing, and I honestly think they're some of the best games I've ever played. But add chapters 3 and 4 onto that, it's some of the best storytelling I've ever seen from games. The comedy and the characters are amazing, and there's just so many little details that get picked up on later. For example, I noticed this when replaying chapter 1. If you examine the TV in Toriel's house, it says that it is no longer plugged in. And then if you examine it in chapter 2, it says that it's plugged in but very dusty. And then later in chapter 3, the TV character Tenor is all about the fact that he's an appliance that has no longer got a use in the household and is just ignored by everyone. And this is what drives his character throughout the chapter. And that's amazing. In fact, this game is the first game I played on Switch 2, and since everything took ages to download, it kept me occupied until Mario Kart World arrived. But despite the gameplay, the music is still always an absolute standout. Here are my top 3 tracks from Chapter 3. And here are my top 3 for Chapter 4. Honestly, comparing Chapter 1 to Chapter 4, it feels like I'm playing a completely different game. And my heart just goes off to him for this entire game. I really cannot wait for Chapter 5 in 2026. I just know it's going to be even better than these two chapters.
I also tried, despite my reservations about it, the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour as a way to kind of ease myself into the console.
Is it perfect? No. Is it worth the price? God, no. However, taking that away, for what it is, it's a fun way to experience this new console. I've not played much, but from what I've seen, it's quite enjoyable and it's helped me become a bit more familiar with the Switch 2 during the first 24 hours. I will say, however, it should have come free with the console, similar to what PlayStation did with Astro's Playroom on the PS5, but nonetheless, the game still has that Nintendo charm.
So that's all of the games that I have bought or have been bought for me for the Switch 2 so far. And obviously my heart will also always be in Deltarune, but I will also agree that Mario Kart World was the best game they could have launched alongside the Nintendo Switch 2. I mean, the game's so fun, I'm probably going to play it as soon as I stop speaking this sentence.
Well, I have also played, but only once, the GameCube games on Switch 2. Zelda Wind Waker, F-Zero FX, and Soul Calibur 2. When they were announced, I thought there were some odd choices for GameCube. Bar like Zelda, I thought F-Zero and Soul Calibur were very weird games to announce to launch with the Switch 2. And to some extent, I do still agree with that. And apart from Zelda, they all felt a bit weird, but having played them, I've really enjoyed them. Zelda, I'm not the biggest Zelda fan, but I really like Wind Waker's art style, and whilst at the time it wasn't very well received, I think it looks really nice and it has aged amazingly. I've not played much of it, but I could see myself coming back to it. F-Zero, whilst I absolutely suck at the game, really knows how to make me have a fun time. I'm awful at it, and I was enjoying my entire playthrough the entire time. I played the SNES game a few times in my entire life, and F-Zero 99, but I've not played much after that. So this was a fun way to experience some other game in the franchise, and I can definitely see myself coming back to the game and hopefully getting better. Same can be said for Soul Calibur 2. I have literally never touched this franchise before now, and it was actually really good fun. I'm sure there'll be some diehard Soul Calibur fan that's saying I'm just playing absolute rubbish, and hey, I had fun. And I can see myself playing the game again in the future, and again, hopefully getting better.
Once I get internet on my system, that is. You see, at the moment, I'm living in student accommodation, and student accommodation doesn't allow you to connect your game consoles to the internet without a wired connection, and you then need to register that on the website. But it does not have a Nintendo Switch 2 registration that I can use, and therefore I can't download any of the big games like, God forbid, Fortnite or... Okay, Fortnite, that's all I've got. So I'm basically just stuck with Mario Kart World, Deltarune, which I went on my data to download because it's Deltarune, and Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. And unless I decide to jump back onto my data and download some of my old games, that's all I've got my Switch 2 right now. And don't get me wrong, they're doing me fine for now, but I would like some more games. Just like some of my old Switch games. And yeah, I can just use my data, but, well, my data's slow. And so I'm kind of just rattling about on these last 3 games. But that is a testament to how good Mario Kart World and Deltarune specifically are. Is that I've only really got those 2 games, and yet I'm having a blast with this thing. It's amazing. Now, I haven't got much to say about the game upgrades on Nintendo Switch 2, so I'll just quickly sum up what I've got to say now.
I think it's good that many games are getting these upgrades, especially those that were released later in the Switch life. However, I'm not a big fan of the fact that you must pay for them. Or, well, some of them. It is a bit of a shit concept in my opinion. I much prefer how Microsoft do it, just letting you have them for free. That said, I do like that it adds extra content to certain games, making it run that bit smoother. And to be fair, I really do like the free patch to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, because it really finally lets that game play better. It still doesn't look the best, but for what it is, frame rate boost, it is a good way to play the game. Because I think that game was really let down by the fact that, the frame rate was shit. I've always said, just fix the frame rate and it'd be a good game, because it's really fun, and I'm actually going to do an entirely new playthrough just to experience it the way it really should have been on the Switch. The Switch 2 is an amazing console so far, and looking at the sale numbers, it has sold amazingly. And by some accounts, it's the quickest selling console of all time. And whilst I'm not really one to celebrate the accomplishments of a billion-dollar company, it's still cool to say the least.
It's obvious that the Switch 2 has its faults. For example, the price point for games isn't exactly fun. The bricking of the systems isn't exactly fun, and the chance that Joy-Con drift might happen again isn't very fun. But it is fun. The console is fun. The games are fun. It is a great console, and I'm very happy to be a part of the early days of the system. And I'm also happy to finally have an upgrade for my Nintendo Switch. I mean, I thought this thing was going to catch fire